Hi everyone, Lexi Cosplay here, and this week's video I'm going to show you something a little different. The original goal was to show you how to make a two-part mold. Not four. Two-part mold. But in epic failure fashion, I forgot a very important ingredient to making a two-part mold, which turned this into a single mold piece. So instead I'm going to show you how to take a failed two-part mold cast, or a single mold if that's what you're making, and make a cut mold. This is where we make one piece of a mold and then cut the middle to split it into two. That way we can cast whatever item we need to cast. I'm actually doing Scorpion's kunai, which is his dagger from the Mortal Kombat movie, and it is in fact sharp whenever I take it off the resin printer. So I'm instead making a mold so that I can cast it into a durable, flexible silicone piece that can be used in a martial arts demonstration. But you can use this for whatever you feel like casting. So go ahead and get some Mold Max or Mold Star silicone. You can get this from Smooth On. And let's get started. My first step is going to be making the mold. I'm going to make a two-part mold. I'm sure you can make a one part and pull it out, but with how sharp this is, I think it's going to chop up the silicone on its way out, and I don't really want to have a lot of leaks like that. So I'm actually going to make a mold with this being the axis right at the tip of this blade, and then I'm going to make the top half of the mold and pour. So my first step is going to be making a box. I'm going to make mine out of cardboard and hot glue to contain the clay and the silicone mold. My next step here is to make a clay bottom just halfway up. You don't use any type of clay, you have to use a special sulfur-free clay so that the silicone does in fact cure. So I'm going to start by kind of just filling in a bunch of the bottoms here. You can also start by putting this directly in the box. Then I'm just trying to get support. So I kind of have it placed high enough from the base. Now I'm going to start filling in all of these. I'm going to start filling in all of these empty spaces around until we have a nice flat bottom. So I've put my base here of clay up to the middle point. I'm going to add a few registration keys. I don't actually have the bolts that they recommend, so I'm using just some clay. And I'm making a bunch of registration keys before I pour the top mold. Registration keys are in. I'm going to be using Mold Star 20T for this mold. I've not used it before, so we're going to see how it goes. We've got part A, part B. I'm going to mix them together. So it appears as though I have enough Mold Star to make exactly one half of this mold. So I'll be ordering more. Okay, so we've waited the time frame that we need to. I guess we just open this bad boy up. So the good part about these clays is that they are reusable. That's what I'm going to do here. So get all the cardboard off. And then what I do is I have a sealed container. I carefully pull all of my clay off, stick it in the container. Also gonna trim up the edges here. So you want to leave your item in the mold because we have to make the second half of this mold now. I'm gonna wait. This is one trial size of the mold star. Got this half done, and that's it. So I bought the gallon size of Mold Max 30, and that's what I'm gonna use for the other half. But we're just gonna leave this here until that arrives. But that's looking nice. Okay, so I finally got in my new mold making material. This time I got Mold Max 30 because clearly I'm going to be using a lot of mold making materials, and this is fairly cheap for as much as you get compared to Mold Star, which is what I had before. So I'm going to try it out. My next step is to make another box to fit around here so that we can pour the top half of the mold in. I'm going to go ahead and just use some leftover cardboard, hot glue the edges, and tape around to make sure that it stays together. Okay, so I have added the box sides and made sure they're tall enough, and glued around the edges just to make sure we have a nice seal. I'm going to put some strapping around the outside just to keep the box nice and contained, but this means we are ready for our second mold pour. So we're also adding clamps as well to hold the box in place. So it's going to be strapping, but really the strapping we have is too bulky. So this will just keep the box nice and contained, but really the important part is the hot glue around the edges so that it doesn't seep through the cracks. So once you have your clamps together, then it's time to start the mold pouring. And pause! So this is where a very important ingredient was missed in the mold making process. When you're making a two-part mold, you do need to use ease release. Otherwise, whenever you pour your next layer of silicone on top, it will in fact cure to the bottom silicone layer. The ease release makes an invisible barrier so that you can split it apart later. So if you're making a two-part mold and you forget ease release, what you've essentially made is a single mold in two layers because they have cured together now. So let's get you back to your regularly scheduled program. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the second half of that mold, blissfully unaware that I've made a mistake, and then we'll get back to showing you how to do that cut mold. So the Mold Max 30 is a little different from the Mold Star that I had used the first time. Mold Star is a 50-50 ratio. Mold Max 30 is a 100-10. So I got a gram scale, and unfortunately my gram scale is pocket sized because I'm an idiot and didn't read it close enough, but it will work. I also got some measuring tubs, so we can measure them out. They do have ounces on here, which is fun, but it does say to use a gram scale. So we're gonna give it a go. You can see we're just at the bottom. I didn't quite mix enough, but that shouldn't be an issue where I didn't quite mix enough there. But we've got our mold in, and it takes 24 hours to cure. I've got the time. Had I used a vacuum chamber, these bubbles would have been gone ahead of time, but they'll slowly work their way up. And I'm just gonna knock on it every once in a while to kind of get them to encourage the bubbles to come out. But now we wait. Alright, so I've made a terrible mistake. In the process of filming, I forgot a very important part, which is mold release. When you cure two halves of silicone together, you need to have a way for them to be separated, because otherwise you're curing the blocks literally together. So I basically have a giant block of silicone in here, pretty sure. This is so much effort into an absolute travesty. Look how nice the sandwich looks though, right? This is how to completely mess things up. If you don't put ease release in the middle, it will in fact cure completely to itself. I think my option right now is to let it finish curing, and then I'm gonna try to slice it down the middle tomorrow. So we're going to take this failed two-part mold, and I'm going to show you how to do a cut mold. A cut mold is used in a lot of dice making, and they use it a lot where they make a single mold and then instead cut the mold into two pieces instead of pouring one half and then pouring a second half to make a two-part mold. So you're essentially making a one-part mold, cutting it into two pieces. That's what we're going to do with this to try to salvage the fail. In fact, it does work. Alright, so it's the next day. We've waited 24 hours for the cure. I have cured the pieces together like a fool, so we're gonna show you how to do a cut mold is what we call it. So we're gonna try to cut. I have a nice seam line here to use as my guide, but I'm not sure how this is gonna go. So let's give it a try. So I can see the print in there, and I'm just very carefully opening it up and cutting along the edge here. I mean, honestly, so far so good. Trying not to get any tears because I'd like to be able to, you know, cast a really nice mold out of this, but let's face it, we're beyond the past of casting anything nicely. It's gonna be a disaster, but we're into it. So this would have been nicer to have cut differently, but we're okay. This is solid. You can see bit of what we got going on in here. I'm actually going to remove this now without ruining the mold in the process, which just means very carefully because it is a knife. I've got both halves. I'm also going to use this section down here as my pour spout. I didn't add clay because it was so close to the edge, but it's not too difficult to do. And it's where the rod will go through anyway. So this is the final mold now. It was originally supposed to be a two-part, but I forgot the ease release, so we turned this into a cut mold. It's nice that I kind of used two different colors here because then I could easily see where the seam is for the line that I wanted to cut. But we have our two-part mold. The only thing that you miss with a cut mold is the registration keys, which is kind of a pain, but we're gonna give it a go. You just have to make sure to line everything up exactly whenever you put it back. And then we're gonna band it and pour our mold. I have the opening here at the top, which is actually the base of the kunai. So that's where I'm gonna pour my mold. But that is how you do a cut mold or a failed two-part mold. So I hope you learned a little something today from my fail. You learned how to make at least the first part of a two-part mold, and essentially as long as you use ease release, you've gotten all the steps down. Or you've learned how to make a cut mold, whether or not you failed, or you actually had a single mold that you really wanted to make a cut mold out of. I hope your result turned out great. Next week's video, or perhaps the week after, I'm going to show you how I'm casting this into a flexible, durable resin. I'm using KX Flex from Smooth On. So I will show you that in my next video, but until then, please like and subscribe to this channel. The more you do, the better of a chance it is that I'll get partnered and in fact get paid to be able to bring you more tutorials in the future. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.